Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with another Bible study. We're back in Genesis. I'm going to go ahead and give my standard disclaimer now. If you are not searching for more out of your faith, this is not the place for you. If you are comfortable with whatever your belief system is, this is not the place for you. We are going to do a reading of the book of Genesis. We are continuing a study of the book of Genesis, and all we are doing is reading it as it says, without the lens that there is a divine human that is sacrificed at the end. I believe in the life, death, miracles, and even the resurrection of Jesus without believing that he was ever a divine being. And if that offends you, this is not the place for you. But for everyone else, we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to find a wife for Isaac. Let's go to Genesis 24, and we're just going to read what it says. Now, we left off with a couple of different, let me see if I can get my voice up. Being able to speak down in the lower register at all is a blessing. I am happy for it. But one day I will be able to do this all the way through with that. But for now, we're going to talk about Isaac. We left off, Sarah had died. They had a whole issue where it seemed like they were justifying the use of this cave for burial at a later period by saying that they had bought it. Right? It didn't seem like a worthwhile deal was struck. There was a good deal of bartering. It could have been just like it was written. It just seems like it maybe there was somebody trying to justify some things. A lot of the book of Genesis seems to be pointing towards Moses, who, in the best possible interpretation, is who wrote the book of Genesis, was trying to justify his religion that he had just founded with the Israelites. And so he changed a lot of things, and he justified things in ways that doesn't make sense, and that's what we get out of this. Now, we're going to talk about the wife for Isaac. Abram had left his father's lands with his wife, who he prostituted out twice before we found out that she was actually his sister too. And we supposed that probably he had been run out of his father's land because he took his father's daughter to wife. Right? That's not something that is generally accepted, even considering that there would have been less people. By the point of this, like if you take Noah's Ark at face value, and that they were the only people left with these three families, right? Well, by this point, you didn't need to be sleeping with your father's daughter. There was plenty of other options outside of your specific close-knit gene pool. Well, now Abram's old and well along into his years, and the Lord has blessed him in every way. And so Abraham instructed the chief servant of his household, who managed all his own, "Place your hand under my thigh, and I will have you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, and that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I am dwelling. But I will go to my country, and my kindred, to take a wife for my son Isaac." So now, what he's doing is sending someone back to his father's lands to get a wife from their first cousin. Right? A little bit shady to me. Another thing, we just saw that Canaan was cursed, right? But Canaan has the land. They are in the land of the Canaanites. They are living among the Canaanites, but they were cursed. But the Blessed One is living among them, right? Instead of having his own land. But he's justifying taking that land later. Okay. And then the servant asked him, "What if the woman is unwilling to follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" And Abraham replied, "Make sure that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me from my father's house and my native land, who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, 'To your offspring I will give this land,' he will send his angel before you so that you can take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman is unwilling to follow you, then you are released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there, because that was an incest baby. They were going to kill that baby. I'm just saying, like, that's what would have happened, right? And so the servant placed his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. Now, it's just generally accepted that that's the way that they did an oath back then. That's a little bit fucking weird to me. And I know somebody just got mad that I'm doing a Bible study and I said the F word, but it is what it is. That's how I speak. I try not to, but it doesn't work. It's just a little bit weird to me that that's the only place that I think in the Bible that they do that. They put their hand under the thigh. And it doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make any, like, I don't understand why you would do that. And if somebody knows why they would do that, let me know in the comments, but I really can't figure out why that was put in there that way. And it doesn't seem normal. It seems Masonic almost. And it's a little bit weird. But then again, the Catholic Church did rewrite everything, so there is that. So the servant placed his thigh, and then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed with all manner of good things from his master in hand. And he set out for Nahor's hometown in Aram Naharaim. And as evening approached, he made the camels kneel down near the well outside the town at the time when the women went out to draw water. Now, they would go out as a group so that they wouldn't be surrounded by strange people. Like, it was dangerous times, and raids and stealing of people was quite common. And so they would go out as a group to draw water. And that's what they're talking about, the time when the women came out. Now, you would have stragglers, and some people just want to do things their own way, but they go as a group so that they would be safer. And the strange man's there when they get there, right? It's like, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham," he prayed, "please grant me success today, and show kindness to my master Abraham. Here I am, standing beside the spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. Now, may it happen to the girl to whom I say, 'Please let down your jar, that I may drink,' and who responds, 'Drink, and I will water your camels as well. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master.'" That works. Like, this part right here actually makes sense, because if you do this, you will get your answer, right? Men, like, very specifically, if you make specific requests, then you will get specific answers. Now, sometimes that answer is no, right? And you have to make allowances for that. Like, sometimes the answer is no because there is something else coming, and sometimes the answer is no because it would be really bad for you. Or, I mean, there's always a reason why there's a no, but sometimes the answer is no, and you have to accept that. In this case, though, it wasn't. And before the servant had finished praying, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. And she was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, and the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. Now the girl was very beautiful, a virgin, who had not had relations with any man. And she went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. So yeah, first cousin. This is his brother's daughter. He already took to wife his father's daughter, and now he's going to get his son, his brother's daughter. So that's like keeping some very specific bloodlines, right? So the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me have a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she replied, and she quickly lowered her jar to her hands and gave him a drink. And after she had given him a drink, she said, "I will also draw water for your camels until they have had enough to drink." And she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw water until she had drawn water for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man watched her silently to see whether or not the Lord had made his journey a success. And after the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring weighing a beka, and 2 gold bracelets for her wet wrist wearing 10 shekels. Whose daughter are you? He asked. Please, tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son that Milcah bore to Nahor. Then she added, we have plenty of straw and feed, as well as a place for you to spend the night. Then the man bowed down and worshipped the Lord, saying, Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not withheld his kindness and faithfulness from my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on a journey to the house of my master's relatives. The girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now, Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he rushed out to the man at the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist, and heard Rebekah's words, This man said this to me. He went and found the man standing by the camels near the spring. He's like, whoa, where'd you get the gold, bruh? I believe that these stories, like this story right here, is an amalgamation, and it is like, this is the tellings of many people pushed together and formed into one narrative. I think that Moses did this. Like, these stories had all been verbal prior to this, and he's the first one to put them down into writing in order to push his religion and to keep things quite specific as to how the outcome has to be. I think the house of Israel that is enslaved in Egypt has to be who he is addressing in this book. And these people know these stories, right, about the wristbands and about the ring. Like, there's something to that. And the fact that Laban goes out there and it's playing into that. It's letting them know that, yes, I've heard your histories as I laid out this foundational story. Come, you who are blessed by the Lord, says Laban. Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. And so the man came to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and feed were brought to the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of his companions. And then a meal was set before the man. But he said, I will not eat until I have told you what I came to say. So Laban said, Please speak. I am Abraham's servant, he replied. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become rich. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, men servants and maidservants, camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and my master has given him everything he owns. Now, it is interesting that he sent back to his father's lands, to his brother's daughter, and he's saying Abraham and not Abram. He's saying Sarah instead of Sarai. Now, they're similar, true, and I think that was one of those amalgamations, right? But if you're going to take it at face value, then why wouldn't you go back and say, I'm Abram's servant? These people don't know Abraham. They know Abram. They know that is their family. They don't know Abraham. That's a whole different name. But this is the divine, infallible word, right? Like, either he was trying to disguise who he was, that he told them to say Abraham and Sarah, or if he's not trying to deceive them and not let them know that, hey, I'm the guy that ran off with my sister, then what it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense for him to, like, he would, if he was trying to identify himself, he would have to say that I am Abram. All right, I am Abram's servant. And his wife Sarai, those would be known. That's Nahor's sister. It's Abraham's sister, or Abram's sister. He doesn't know these two people. My master made me swear an oath and said, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my kindred to take a wife for my son. And then I asked my master, What if the woman would not come back with me? He said to me, The Lord, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you may take a wife from my son, from my kindred, and from my father's house. And when you go to my kindred, if they refuse to give her to you, then you will be released from my oath. And then when I came to the spring today, I prayed, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if only you would make my journey a success. And here I am, standing before the spring, and if a maiden comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she replies, drink, and I will draw water for your camels as well, may she be the one that the Lord has appointed. And after Rebecca came, like we just read that, it's a repeat. And I think that is part of the amalgamation to make sure that that point is driven home. And she quickly lowered a jar and said, and then he asked, whose daughter are you? And she gave her genetics. Now, if you'll show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. But if not, let me know, so that I may go elsewhere. And Laban and Bethuel answered, if this is from the Lord, we have no choice in the matter. Rebekah is here before you. Take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, just as the Lord decreed. But what they should have said was, well, who the hell is Abraham? That's not my brother, right? But no, it's a narrative. When Abraham's servant heard the words, he bowed down to the ground before the Lord, and then he brought out jewels of silver and gold, and articles of clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious gifts to her brother and her mother, and then he and the men with him ate and drank and spent the night there. And when they got up the next morning, he said, send me on my way to my master. But her brother and mother said, let the girl remain with us 10 days or so. After that she may go. But he replied, do not delay me. Since the Lord has made my journey a success, send me on my way, so that I may go to my master. So they said, we will call the girl and ask her opinion. And then they called Rebekah and asked her, will you go with this man? I will go. So they sent Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become the mother of thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. Because, that's what you do, right? When somebody's leaving, you're like, may you have thousands of kids, and may they come to trod upon their enemies and to take the cities from them. Like, that's just what you do when you send somebody off. Now, granted, they were sending her across the desert to the next fertile spot over, which was a significant distance through the desert, and so there's reason to be concerned, but you would speak a blessing, right? But it's just weird that it just happens to coincide with the blessing sent somewhere else. Maybe it's perfectly normal. I don't know. It just strikes me as weird. Like, this part, no problem. Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands upon thousands. I can stretch my imagination and not be like, okay, but may your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. It's just a step too far for me. It doesn't sound like something that a brother is going to bless his sister with, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't fit for me. It's another one of those pieces that doesn't quite fit, but people just accept it. And they're like, oh, well, it's an old story. And yes, I get that. It is an old story. It is an amalgamation of a bunch of stories. But we're supposed to take this as the divine word of God. Infallible. Every word correct. Well, why isn't stuff not expressed more plainly? Why is stuff not told to us? Like, and I'm not talking about the mysteries. I understand why the mysteries are locked. I'm talking about the normal stuff, the stuff that we've already talked about. Like, it should be absolutely obvious that yes, this is needed. Like, if you need a blood sacrifice to go to heaven, why in Genesis is there no word for heaven? Why do we not have heaven? Why is there no hell? Why is there no damnation? Why is there no forgiveness of sin? Like, they make sacrifices, but it is gratitude sacrifices. We get into the beginnings of a required sacrifice. In order to receive a blessing, sacrifice your son, and it gets stopped by a different angel, coincidentally. All of these things add together are what gives me pause. And I grew up steeped in this. Like, I grew up Baptist and Pentecostal, and like, I was baptized in the Baptist and the Pentecostal church. And I've read the book, and I lived the assumptions for a long time. And then when I decided, like, I've got a whole story about that, and I'm not going to get into that, but when I realized that it can't be the infallible word, these things just leap out at me now. It's like a slap across the face when I read them. It's like something inside of me is just like, no, are you kidding me? Why is it not clear what the sacrifice needs to be? How to do the sacrifice so that it will be accepted, right? Why is that not perfectly clear in Genesis from Noah or even from Adam, all the way back to Adam? You have been cast out from this garden, and now you must live by this law, and you must make these sacrifices. Should have been laid out right then, but it wasn't. There was no law laid out. And when we get to Noah, we get the law of the covenant, the law of the ark, the law of the rainbow. We get that. And that is probably the truest of all of them. I think once we get past that point, we get into the workings of men and the machinations of the principalities. We have been told that there are principalities, that there are forces in the air fighting that we cannot see in an unseen realm, right? Well, that's angels and demons. The only difference between an angel and a demon and an alien is what you call them. They have different values. What we recognize as an angel, we tend to see as having values towards the light. And what we call demons, we tend to have values towards what we call the dark. And they serve evil. They serve good. And there is a good and evil dichotomy. There is. But we as humans rarely ever achieve the level of evil or good. Even the best among us have very rarely ever achieved good. And like, it's a lot easier to achieve evil because you can sell yourself into that and go with it. I know evil people. Like, not just bad, but like evil people. People that cut things and do things that are just terrible. Terrible. And they love it. Oh. Things should be more clear. And I do this as a for me thing. This is me rationalizing myself into this new thing that I am doing. And what I am doing, I don't know that I've laid it out, but like, I am serving God. I am following the covenant of the rainbow. I'm going to shed no lifeblood. Right? Oh, I've done that. And then I'm following God. I'm not calling him by any other name. Like, calling him God by itself is limiting him to something that he can't be limited to. He is beyond the scope of personification. He cannot manifest fully inside of himself. And I don't believe that he created this exclusive divine being to manifest inside either. I think Jesus was a man who saw the prophecies and made it right and did what he needed to do. And I fully appreciate that, probably more than most Christians do. Now, I'm not going to say all Christians, because some Christians get it. And if you are a Christian, I'm not trying to down your religion. I'm really not, because you can find God through Christianity. I can't call any other name than God. You can do whatever. I'm not here to condemn you for whatever. But what I am telling you is that God is beyond the scope of personification. Calling him a he is already limiting him more than he can be limited. He is beyond sexes. He is beyond race. He is beyond the concept of people. We're spiritual beings having an experience in a flesh suit. And our goal is to strive towards Him, towards God, towards the light, and He who enlightens us. And I know that's going to set some triggers off for some people, but I don't care. I promise you, I serve one God, He who is, was, and always shall be, the creator and sustainer of all life itself. That is my God. And it doesn't matter what name you call Him. The only name I can call Him is there. He is the I am. He is Yahweh. He is beyond a name. It is limiting to put a name upon Him. But the book of Genesis appears to be a justification of Moses. And what he is justifying is taking over the land of Canaan. He is justifying the genocide that is coming. We probably won't finish out Genesis. I'm not even sure. I forget. I'm not one of those people that remembers how many chapters there are in every book. I don't know how many chapters there are in Genesis. We're probably not going to get much farther than this in Genesis, because I want to get into Exodus. Because Exodus is where Moses tells on himself. And he lets you know that he as a man decided the laws, that we needed laws. And while the laws may have been divinely inspired, he may have gotten them from one of these angels who engraved them on stone. That is entirely possible. I do not doubt that that is possible at all. But if that happened, he asked for that. And he made it happen. Right? And we're going to see. I'm going to show you that. And then, if that is the case, if man had to ask for the laws to follow, then there can't be a sacrifice required for that. We've already shown that there was never a sacrifice required up until the sacrifice of Isaac, which is disputed. Like, that very account, some people say is Ishmael, and some people say is Isaac. Like, I think that we don't know. I think that for too long we have assumed that the things that are written are exactly as they're written. There are great amounts of knowledge contained in this book. There is a way to become saved in this. There are many ways to become saved in this book, and that just set off somebody else's bells. Well, there's only one way, the way of the truth and the life, to be washed in blood. Jesus. It was never required. You don't see heaven and hell in here. Like, you see the separation of the heavens. You see the firmament being established, right? Oh, there's flat earth. There's no flat earth. It's round. There's wavelengths, and gravity is not as we conceive it, but it is electromagnetics. And it is holding different frequencies at different levels. That's why we get different variations of stratification in our mantle and the core. And the liquid stays at a certain level. Like, if you let liquid go, it goes down to sea level. Well, that is because that is where it is supposed to be. And then that's why water flows downhill, is because it's attracting the water to that point where it is where it needs to be. And you get lower, you get denser water. You get higher, you get less dense water. And you get to the very top, and the water's not very dense at all. But if you get down to the very bottom, it can crush you, right? That is both the weight, which is immense, but it's the electromagnetic hold is what causes the weight. Well, what we breathe, this air, it's a liquid. It's a different wavelength of liquid. This liquid is what we breathe. That liquid is what fish breathe. Well, there's another liquid on the other side if you get beyond our atmosphere, and it's a different wavelength. So what we have is held here by the electromagnetics of Earth. That liquid we can't breathe. It's spaced too far apart, but it's still a liquid. There's still stuff out there. There's dust floating around. There's oxygen pockets, nitrogen pockets. Like, all of the gases are represented in space. It's just not condensed in a way that we can breathe it. It is far between. I'll grant you that. I don't know what's between there, but there's got to be some kind of electromagnetic force. Alright, I'm getting way too off in this, and that's because I'm wrapping up Genesis right here. Like, if you are God, like, consider for a moment that you might be the creator. And with what we've gone through in Genesis, I'm going to assume that you've seen the other stuff. Like, just the stuff that I've pointed out. Like, we haven't even finished the chapter, but just the stuff I have pointed out shows you that there's something not right. Like, even if I'm not right, and I'm always willing to consider that I'm not right, but even if I'm not right, something is not right. But that's because this is written so long after. You want to tell me that Moses just, like, perfectly remembered everything from creation for, what, 2,000 years? I forget what the date, but it was 2,000 years, I think, from Adam to Noah, and then Noah's another 1,000 to Isaac. I think that's what it was. So we're 3,000 years in here, and then we get 4,000 years in by the time we get to Moses. Like, it just doesn't. It doesn't. Like, it's too much. It can't be infallible. The book of Genesis cannot be infallible. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't include wisdom, that there is not things to learn from here. There are a lot of stories and allegories, and there's a lot of truth that it can be nuggeted out of this. Like, you can find the nuggets of truth. The covenant of the rainbow, that is repeated elsewhere. Other people have something very similar to that. That is how we are supposed to live. We are not supposed to aggress upon anyone for any reason. Now, you are allowed to defend yourself because man is sinful. Man naturally wants to go down that slope towards the dark and not up the spiral towards the light. That is not his natural inclination. That is why we need God. That's why we need to strive for God. But if you are honestly striving and failing, you're not condemned to hell for that. Right? Like, in this point in time, there was no hell. There was no hell in the time of Moses. It wasn't until much later that hell came along. It wasn't until much later that the concept of heaven came along. These sacrifices were for blessings, not for sins. These sacrifices were for gratitude, which meant they got accepted. But they were not a required sacrifice. There was never a sacrifice required. And if there was no sacrifice required, there was no human sacrifice required for sure. You're not washed in the blood. That is a cult. The Catholic Church, man, the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has gone and taken something that was a man. This man, I'm going to tell you how I stand. And if it pisses you off, it pisses you off. I think that Jesus was someone who was religiously inclined and to the point of piety. Now, it was not possible to become a responsible man in Jewish culture and not be married. It just didn't happen. You were not listened to if you were a 30-year-old unmarried man in Jewish culture. There was something wrong with you. But if you were a widower, or if there was something tragic that happened in your life that took from you those things that were expected of you, I could see how that could drive someone to a greater depth of understanding. And the result of that greater depth of understanding was realizing that David told us many times, well, there was no sacrifice required. Read the Psalms. There was no sacrifice required. And then you read back into Genesis, and he reads back because he knew the Torah, right? He was reading the Torah at the age of 12, which was right before the age of majority. And he knew it backwards and forwards so much that people marveled at it. So he read through Genesis and he's seeing the same shit that I am. He's like, man, this just don't add up. And then he gets into the law, and the law is like, you must do this, and you must do this, and you must do this, and you can't walk this far on a Saturday. And all of these things to limit and restrict men, because men asked for that. And he's like, man, that is a lot of... And then he looks around at the temple and the money changers. And he looks around at the Pharisees and their scorn and disdain for the injured and the sick and the poor. And he looks at the Sadducees and their utter devotion to religious texts to the exclusion of all other things. And he looks around. That was another group. I can't remember who it is. Anyway, he looks at these people and he's like, this is not what God intended. But he sees it. Because in prophecy, if you look at it and what they're looking for, this is why I believe in the fulfillment of prophecy, is because if enough people focus on one thing, then that thing must come true. There are enough people focused on end times prophecy and the way that it is described in the book of Revelations, and the way that it is described in the Quran and the Hadiths, and the way that it is described even in the Old Testament. And there's enough people that are looking for that outcome, that outcome must come forth. And that is why I believe that prophecy will be fulfilled. Not necessarily because God decreed it, but because man is demanding it. And because man is demanding it, it's got to come forth. But Jesus looked at this prophecy and he's like, well, what I can do is this. And so he did it. He started living the prophecies and he had them fulfilled. Now, there can be divine intervention in that. I am not above thinking that is possible. I fall short when I think that it was a divine incarnation. I don't believe that it is possible for there to be a divine incarnation. We are all a very tiny sliver of God, but we are none of us gods ourselves. And so he made a sacrifice. He sat in Gethsemane and cried, asking to not have to make that sacrifice. And yet he was still willing to do it. He allowed himself to be beaten and spoke not a word. He carried a cross despite the fact that he was suffering from blood loss and fatigue from torture. He allowed himself to be nailed on the cross. And he gave up his spirit when it was required. He did all of the things. I do believe that there was a resurrection, because I believe that we are energetically souls, that our souls existed before they took on this meat suit, and that they will be here afterwards. And it is not a step for there to be the soul coming back. There are ghosts in the land. There are demons that were driven out into pigs. Right? That's not a physical demon, but a spirit that is a ghost, that is an energy. Well, I think we have that energy. I think it is held in place by magnetic centers in our body, just the same way that the air is held on the earth. I think that in the same way that water is held to the earth, our spirit holds these to us. It holds our flesh and our bone and our sinew. All of that is controlled by the magnetics in us. And so I don't doubt that he could come back and make an appearance, even to the point of pulling on the flesh again. It's not beyond the scope. I have seen some crazy things. And so I am willing to accept a lot of things without seeing them. But they have to make sense. It does make sense for there to be a resurrection. There does make sense for prophecy to fulfill. It does make sense for a man to see what needs to be done and to do it. Moses did that. I don't think he did it right, but he did that. Abram, we ain't going to talk about Abram, but Noah did that when they struck the covenant of the rainbow. Right? Adam did that when he fucked up and got kicked out of the garden. Like, all of these things play together into the formation of our journeys. And part of our journey is learning new things. Part of learning new things is letting go of things that you already, like, that served its purpose for you. When I found Jesus, it was great. I was in a dark spot and I needed the law. I needed him to fulfill the law, but I needed the law to be a required thing. But as I've grown older and as I've studied this book more, I see that the only thing that was ever required was our commitment to God, to source, to the one, to whatever you want to call it. You can call it by whatever name you want. I can't. I can't call it by the standard names. I can't. That is blasphemy to me. And we'll talk about that in Exodus. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. I hope I didn't step on your toes too bad, because if you're still here, I didn't, and you're blessed for that. I appreciate every single minute that y'all are here with me. I hope I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to where I stand. Like, this is me rationalizing to me and sharing it with you. I genuinely hope that I help someone with this. I hope that someone sees this and it helps with some of the questions they have. And it gives them a little bit of confidence to do what they are called to do. And you might be called to call upon the name of Jesus for the entirety of your life. And if so, that is cool. You may be called to call upon the name of Allah for all of your life. And if you do, that is cool too. Or Buddha, or whoever, Shiva, Krishna, whoever you happen to call on. You can find a path to the divine through them. That is where I am. It may not be where you are, and I'm cool with that. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Till next time, this has been Pittstake. Peace.